Hey y'all, it's Laura, and I'm back with a DIY embellishment video using up these border strips. So these are all cut up from my stash kit. All of the papers have now no border strips to their names, and I've grabbed some bits and pieces that I've included in this kit. So I have some chipboard words, I have some ephemera, mostly from the Felicity Jane collections. I have some Scrap and Happy Studio tiny epoxy flare, and some Felicity Jane puffy stickers. So I'm getting started, and my idea here is largely influenced by Vicki Boutin's collections. I don't know if you've noticed recently, but in some of her layered stickers, there's strips, a large element, a word phrase, and a small element. And I thought that would be really fun to recreate using my stash kit and not using her products to see how I could do. And it's a bit of an experiment, but I think they came out really fun, and I'm excited to see how I can use them on my layouts and my pocket pages this month. So I'm starting out with just different strips of paper from the border strips, layering them up with some little ephemera and a Scrap and Happy Studio flare. And I decided this one needed to be a little bit thicker, and so I'm going to add a third piece on the back. And that's pretty much what I end up doing for all of them, but there's a big difference in the sizes of the lengths as well as the way that I chose to embellish each of them. Some of them have very different color schemes, which I found really interesting because the papers have a range of reds to pinks to wood grain to blue. It was very, very out there as far as nothing quite perfectly matched, and so making things coordinate was a bit tricky, but I thought it was kind of fun challenge as well. I did add a tab at the back of this one, just thought it added a nice little third dimension to it, and think it turned out pretty cute. Moving on to the next one. This one's a little bit larger. It's from a paper pad piece of paper, and so it makes a nice base, and I'm just going to start layering other strips on top of it. And this is a really, really quick and easy way to make DIY embellishments, and I will be showing you how to use them throughout the month with my stash kit. I'm hoping to use all of them up by the end of the month, and I don't want to add anything to my stash. I want the kit to get used up completely, or as much as possible. Now, my best piece of advice for making DIY embellishments is don't go crazy. Do not make 100 of them unless you plan to share with some friends, because they can take a while to use up. I generally stick to 5 or 6 on one go, and A, it makes for a really quick project to do and you can use up some stash in the process, but B, you need to be able to use the embellishments, and you may get bored if they're too repetitive and you have 100 of them. So I like to do between 4 and 6. If I'm going to make a layout right away using several, I might make, say, 8 or 10, but that's probably the larger end of the number I will make, and I think it works out better that way personally. That way you don't get bored with them and have them just sitting in your stash, not necessarily coordinating with anything in particular. These obviously will coordinate really well with my stash kit, which I plan to be using all month long because they came from my stash kit. And these are pieces that I normally throw away. Yes, I hate to admit that. I do, for the most part, throw these away. I don't really love keeping scraps past my kits, so if they don't get used up over the course of the kit, they tend to get tossed. I just don't see a point in hoarding paper scraps when I have so much paper in my stash. So I am just kind of lining up different bits and pieces. This one I wanted to try something a bit different, so I'm going to create 3 little banners that are going to hang down from the embellishment, and you'll notice that the cluster of embellishments on each of these is in a different spot, and that's intentional. Some of them are in the center, some are on one side or the other, and that gives me a little bit of freedom to decide how to use it. Quite often I will use this sort of embellishment right underneath of a photo or right next to a photo, and if I'm going to use it on a pocket page card, it makes a great filler card. It's already embellished for you. Just pop it onto a simple card and bam, it's done. Slide it into the pocket. Now I normally do 4 by 6 cards, so that's why these will be useful. If you're only doing smaller 3x4s, you might want to make your version smaller. Now, I'd love to see if you give these a go, so be sure to share them in my Scrapbook All the Pictures Facebook group, or tag me if you post them anywhere on social media. I'm on most of the social medias, and the links for my profiles are always in the description box below if you're looking for me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So I am going to go ahead and try to squeeze in a heart on this one, but it doesn't quite make it. I felt like it was overpowering the little banners, and I really liked the look of them and kind of wanted them to stand out. So instead, I decided to grab a little journaling spot and make this one for journaling. So I'm going to have a journaling spot, a little label, and then overlap it with my favorite. And I think that's a nice little sentiment that can work well with just about any layout, really. I mostly scrap my children, and so my favorite can work for everybody. I try to put that on everybody's layouts so it doesn't look like one actually is my favorite over the others. They're all my favorite. That's the way it works. Now this one I really wanted to dress up just a little bit more, and this pink bow seemed perfect, but it's so bright pink. I decided I better tuck it behind the embellishment so it doesn't overtake the embellishment. So I'm going to use some really thin 1/8 inch tape and tape it down behind the cluster. That way it just pops out the top. And I don't know about you, but I sometimes find little bows like this kind of tricky to use, but when they're already created on a cluster, they're no longer the focus of the embellishment. They're just a part of the embellishment. I did bring in some teeny tiny little gold hearts that I have fussy cut from some washi tape that I keep on my desk as a little extra something cute you can put on if you need just a tiny little embellishment somewhere. Now this one I decided I wanted to try a really long one. So this might work really well with more banners behind it, like if you did strips behind the photo and then put this on top of the bottom of the photo. I think it would look really cool, so I may give that a try for this one. And I was trying to keep it as neutral as possible so that it would be fairly easy to use. Some of the color schemes for these are very distinguished, like the one at the very top with the yellow and the red and the black, and then the one at the top right, which is very, very pink. And so this one I was trying to keep fairly neutral. It has some pinks and some very light reds, and then this just pop of blue and black, and that's a pretty neutral color scheme. I think that can be used on any layout in my kit, and I'm really excited to get this giant one onto a page. So I'm going to try to do it very, very soon to show you how to use it. So I used this to cover up some really random words that were on that one banner, and I'm just using the banner that I covered up for the outline. So it has like a nice pink outline around the blue words, and I thought that looked really cool. So I'm just going to add another layer onto this one. There we go. So it's a pretty substantial piece, and then just do a very simple embellishment. I think I decided to put some banners underneath this one as well, just because I figured if it's going to be this big, it might as well be a bit of a statement piece, and so that's what I went with. I add a heart over the word "and" because it still makes sense even without the word "and." It says so many ideas, not enough time. And so covering up that "and" to have a focal image in the center really was completely fine because it still worked. Had these two little banners, decided to go ahead and pop them underneath of the heart, just like that. And I will tape them down on the back just to make sure that they stay in place. And then I'm going to come in with a couple of stickers, I believe. Yes, I think I had these puffy stickers and decided at first I was going to try a little triangle, and then I felt like it needed something a little bit bigger than that, so I think I replaced it with a puffy flower instead. And then I'll come back in with those little gold hearts and kind of spread those around the embellishment just for a bit of fun, because I thought it needed a little something extra, a little something shiny added on. And I tried to avoid adding Nuvo to these in particular because I knew they would be used as clusters around photos, and so I likely would want to add Nuvo next to them on the page Sometimes I do add Nuvo when I'm making them, but in this case I decided to challenge myself not to do that. Instead, find other ways to add that tiny bit of embellishment at the end. And so these little gold hearts really came in handy for that purpose. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Do you make your own embellishments? Do you use up scraps like this to make embellishments? Do you just use them on layouts? Do you use them on pocket page cards? How about greeting cards? These are great for greeting cards as well because you can get a quick little cluster and a sentiment onto the card and then just have a basic panel in the background. Greeting cards don't have to be flashy, they don't have to be bright and bold and have huge focal images. They can just have a very simple message on them as well. So let me know how you use your embellishments and whether or not you create your own. Now, this embellishment was kind of interesting. It took a bit of a turn that I wasn't expecting. I decided to add a black bow onto this larger one, just because the only black really was on one of the papers and on the heart, and I felt like it needed one more hit of black to make sure that it looked intentional, and that embellishment cluster became so big. It is quite the statement piece, and I am really curious how I'm going to use that one. This one down at the bottom, I use these little lemons that I fussy cut from the second ephemera pack in my kit, and I knew that I would be challenged to use those on a layout, but by putting them onto a DIY embellishment, I would have to use them, and they aren't the star of the show. They're just kind of tucked behind a word phrase and a heart, and I think that helps to kind of de-dramatize them or remove their dramatic effect, and they just kind of look like a pop of yellow instead. So this was the last embellishment because I was running out of border strips, and so I decided to do just one more, and it is quite pink, but that's all right. And do 3 layers of pink, and then this one actually ended up being my favorite. I love how this one came out. So it's just 3 strips, just kind of on top of each other with that little confetti one in the center. So that's going to be the base where I put my embellishment on. I grabbed this word lovely off of the sticker sheet. So I've got a little puffy word in the center. I'm going to grab one of these little hearts and pop it right next to lovely. And then I'm going to grab a Scrap and Happy Studio flare as well as one of a teeny tiny heart. And this one's done. It's funny how the simplest design is often the best one. So that's it for these DIY embellishments. I do have still photos for you at the end, and I have a whole playlist of other DIY embellishment ideas if you'd like to see more. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, bye.